Hello and welcome to the continuation of my beginner fishing series. Today I'm going to talk about lures and lure choice for beginners. I'm going to try streamline the process of choosing lures, not getting too distracted in the tackle shop, picking up the flashiest, most expensive lure, and a few little more tips and just basically try and ease you into the world of fishing. Spin fishing, lure fishing can be made quite complicated by people whose interest it is to keep you spending lots and lots of money. And I'm going to try simplify it down to 3 main lure types. By the end of this video, as a beginner, you should have a pretty clear understanding of what lure to use in what situation, and roughly how to work them, when to work them, and in what weathers they all work the best. In the interest of saving everybody some time, the video at the start will have a 10-minute segment where I just discuss very quickly what lures you're going to need, what weather to throw them in, and how to do it. After that, I'm going to have another breakdown video of me in the water throwing the lures and discussing their action and how they work. So if you want to just go on your way, watch the first 10 minutes and then push on forward to the rest of the video if you want to see a little bit more of a detailed breakdown. But first, a little clip of what happened while I was trying to show something off.
I recommend keeping tension on your line like this. No way. No way. No way.
But this part is obviously in the more detailed explanation section. But for now, let's just go on to the basic lure guide.
So, moving on to the visual section of lures for beginners. Here's my big lure box. These are all my larger, wider lures. They go into my back pocket of my belt. I'm gonna probably address that in a whole other video, but something I think every beginner should have, or every beginner should start with, and it's probably a little bit controversial, is, where's she gone? My little beauty. So I started off with this, not this exact lure, because the exact lure I lost to a bluefish, because I didn't listen to my own tips 3 years from now, and didn't tie my line, didn't use the correct leader, you know, problems. But I recommend every beginner should start off with a plug of some description. Isn't super beginner friendly, I should say. The whole point of it is you pull it towards you, and it does a rattling motion, and because of its little lip, it's going to go dive right down. This one's a deep diver. I think it's a 1.5 foot, something like that. It's pretty deep, and so especially if you're fishing over weedy ground, this is not your friend. But the reason I recommend this is the lure that got me hooked onto spin fishing in general. I picked up one of these at a shop because it looked nice, it looked flashy. I wanted to try it on. I didn't have some nice lure set up or anything else. Just had a regular old beginner hand-me-down rod with some €20 kiddies reel that I got in the camping shop. And I wanted to try a lure. And I threw it in, and straight away, perfect action. You really can't mess it up. The only problem that happens is, of course, when you cast a little bit wonky and the line gets caught up in one of your trebles, normally your front treble, your line will swing back around here, catch your front treble, and then it'll swing all weird. You'll feel that. But when you get this and you cast this in, this is what will start the belief process that a lure will actually catch a fish. For me, at least, for the longest time, I was fishing with baits since I was a child, maybe 5 years old or something, when my dad first took me out. And I just kept bait fishing. I didn't really believe in lures up until, I'd say, 2.5, 3 years ago. This was the one that started that belief for me and started this journey for me, really. You're instantly going to have action. You're instantly going to have some feeling of satisfaction, and you'll feel like a fish is on the end of your line, especially if it's a nice one. This one right here is actually a Rapala XR10. I think all the Rapala markings and everything else have probably faded from it. But you'll feel like you have a fish on the end of your line, and you could feel how a fish could think this is a live bait and strike it. So that's why I would recommend a plug. Moving on to something a little bit different, a little bit more beginner friendly, a little bit more easy to use, are your soft plastics. Now this is the Savage Gear gravity stick. This one's just got a big weedless hook, goes into the soft plastic. This just goes down, tail wobbles around like that, and makes a nice little sound. Savage Gear say that, you know, the tails are going to make the whole difference, paddle tail, pin tail. I'm not really here to discuss little nitpicky stuff like that. I've caught bass on the paddle tail, and I've had strikes on the paddle tail. I don't think I've ever had anything on the twin tail, as they call it, or the pin tail, which is just basically just that. It's just a little strip. That's effectively what it looks like when I just pinch the end of this off. Almost no action on that one, but apparently bass strike it, bass go for it. If you look at their YouTube, I'm sure they have promotional videos of that happening. I think this is a pretty good beginner lure. You really can't go too much wrong with this. The difference between soft plastics, plugs, and everything else is you can work these guys super slow, and they'll basically always have action if it's a well-designed little soft plastic. Might sound a bit silly to say a well-designed soft plastic, because all it is just plastic with a hook in it. But believe it or not, there is actually some difference. I bought a Savage Gear super realistic perch, I think 2 years ago. I got burned by that one. I still think about it sometimes. I think I paid maybe 12-15 euro for this perch, threw it in the water, worked it slow, and all it did was coast along in a straight line. So I recommend the Savage Gear gravity stick. Really good action, can't really fuck it up, can't really get snagged on much. The only way you can get snagged is through this front bit here, but the whole rest of the lure is basically not snaggable. Your lure is on the your hook is on the inside here, so when a fish bites down, I'll use my hand for contrast, your hook is going to come out like that, and you're going to be able to then catch your fish. I didn't really believe in that too much until I seen it happening. And I was catching pike, not necessarily on these, I was using different soft plastics for pike, but I was catching pike with them, and the other day I caught a nice big bass on one of these actually. So highly recommend these. These should go in your tackle box at the start. Now these are a little bit pricier than the other ones. You could probably get cheaper options on the market. They have a kit of these, which is actually what this whole box is. So they come stacked in different colors, pintails, twin tails, paddle tails, the lot, all the way down. They have little rattles and everything else you can put in. That's getting a bit technical. That one's about 30 quid, which in my opinion isn't actually that bad. At least for the value that I got, I'm actually quite happy with it. Moving on quite swiftly. Something like this is very useful, especially for beginners. You also really can't mess this up too much. This one is actually a weedless spoon. So if I was just engage this weedless part here, it's a little bit finicky. These two lines here are supposed to keep the weeds off it. It's going to swim in a way that doesn't have a treble hook basically directly behind it, like other treble hook lures, where the treble is just at the very back of the lure, and it's always going to get snagged up. This little baby that I have just dropped isn't necessarily going to have that effect, because the treble hook is a little bit inside the profile of the lure itself. If I go over to my belt here, open up my smaller tackle box, the metals, apart from those kind of spoons that I recommend, again, another branding moment, but I thought these were really super. They cast out like a rocket. These are the Savage Gear Surf Seeker, 30 gram. I really like how thin this profile is, goes into nice and chunky, and when you cast that, aerodynamically amazing. I've been out fishing on days when I really shouldn't have been, when the wind is maybe 22, 23 knots, because that's what it gets like around here in winter, and obviously didn't catch a thing. But the cast on these is ridiculous. It's going to cut right through your wind, it's going to cut right through any bit of messing, any breeze, anything else. It's just going to fly. Highly recommend everybody have a spoon also. Apart from that, I don't really think beginners need to be thinking too much about anything else. I have loads of little lures that I've collected over the years. Little pencils, that's the gravity pencil, other little smaller rapalas, little smaller jerkbaits. All this sort of stuff is kind of this is when you start getting, if you don't mind the terminology, this is when you start getting into the weeds and getting into the bit of a faff, because you can be, you can catch fish on the 3 lures that I mentioned and never have to touch any of these pencils or anything else, except the belief is, or the point is that you'll, in certain scenarios, be able to excel with very specific lures. If I was a beginner, if I was you, I would stick to the 3 that I just mentioned. So you got your metal, you got your plug, you got your soft plastic. I don't think you really need to stray too far beyond that, especially not to catch your first fish. If you go out and you get all this stuff, the net, all the little bits and pieces, the most expensive rod and reel that you can think of, what you're going to do is you're going to be sinking. Jesus Christ, I don't even want to imagine how much all my lures cost, really. It's actually making me sick. Some of these guys are 20 euro a pop. You'll be sinking probably in the region of maybe 5, 6, maybe even 700 euro altogether into lures when you've never caught a fish in your life. And then you're kind of left at the end of it going, you know, what did I really do all this for? If you can't catch something on a soft plastic, a metal, or a plug, I really don't think you've any business trying to go, you know, change up your lure and try something completely different. You know, I would stick to the basics. Don't get too bogged down in whatever Savage Gear or Rapala or whoever else is trying to sell you the most uber realistic drop shot shrimp. If you can't catch a lure with the 3 basic lures that I've just listed, I would say leave it off. Don't really mind it too much. I think you should stick to the basics. Once you get in charge of your basics and everything else, you can move on to your pencils, your sticks, whatever you want. Go crazy, go ballistic. But at the start, definitely just focus on what you have here.
Now, unfortunately, I recorded a whole section of about 15 minutes out on the water to discuss metals and discuss how to throw them and a few little bits and pieces. For some reason, the GoPro decided that I would have an earthquake. So the entire footage just basically ended up like this. And in the interest to not give anybody a headache, I've just decided to exclude this section. Just keep in mind that metals are used basically to try cast out as far as possible. If you're getting light metals, it's not really worth your time. And use them to cut through the wind. That's about it. And now moving on to the next section, where I was showing off how to use weedless plastic so well that I had a fish strike on camera as I was explaining it.
The rule of it not hitting the bottom doesn't really apply. Weedless soft plastics, I bounce around and I completely really don't care where they end up. You can get snagged up the odd time, even actually with this specific lure in particular. I think Savage Gear has a promotional clip where they snag up their weedless soft plastics after Henry Gilby's, after giving a 10-minute spiel on why they'll never snag and you can just have infinite fun. But in general, the weedless soft plastics, they really do not snag, and you can cast them all the way down. I recommend keeping tension on your line like this. No way. No way. No way. He was just on. And there you go. There you have it. Yeah, I just dropped them. So if you follow my basics, obviously it can work out a little bit in your favor. See if we can get that back out to him and see what he has to say this time. But keep the soft plastics, keep them low, keep them slow, and work them steadily. And just remember that you're always trying to get a little bit of an action on that tail, on the tail end of it. Something to keep in mind once you cast out, your rod might have all the sensitivity in the world, but I still always recommend, just like the way your index is your trigger, you can always feel the most with your index. Little finger on the index there, especially when the line is taut. You'll always be able to feel exactly what's going on. I can feel it swishing around in the water. It's just a little bit being affected by the current, being pulled a little bit now. I'm going to start the retrieve. When you hold your lure like that on the way down after you've closed your bail, it's very useful. You can feel at what point it's going to hit the ground, what point it's going to hit a rock or anything else, and then when you switch back from your soft plastic back to your plug or to your metal, you know roughly how many seconds, how much time it took for your lure to sink, and you can adjust that then so you don't get snagged up and lose those nice expensive plugs. Keeping in line with what I recommended earlier, this is a Yuzuri, don't know exactly which one, it says Yuzuri F on the top. What this is though, more importantly, is a floating plug. So it's amazing, really. You cast that, no matter how far you cast it, it's just going to float in the water just like he is there, and he won't get action, he won't start diving until I start moving my rod. So it's going to be very hard to cast. You can cast and forget about him, leave him there for a little bit, and you're not going to get snagged up or anything nasty like that. You could even potentially get a strike on the surface just from the little splash he makes when he arrives, but you know, you never know. Give him a few casts. See if I can cast them a little bit closer over there. And it's great, really. I can just cast them out, close my reel, clip my little headphones into my stuff here so I don't lose them, and I don't have to worry about him getting snagged up or going anywhere too silly, because he's a floating lure, which is why, again, recommend this for beginners. You guys, the first time you get snagged up, you are going to be hating life and wondering why you picked this hobby up, which is why most of my tips are actually just against snagging. You might have noticed that two of my tips in my previous video were actually got to do with not snagging. You have to show up at low tide, have a little look-see, and then choose the correct lure to not snag in the right location. Reason I say that, when you snag up for the first time, you'll know all about the pain. You'll understand what it feels like to snag up and have basically a day of fishing totally ruined on you. And you see now, my lure, I'm glad it did this now, my lure has wrapped itself around the leader line. The front treble has caught itself up in the leader line there, and it's completely impeded, completely stopped the action. Glad that happened now so I can show it to you. This is just going to happen to you. I've experimented with smaller clips, lighter line, everything else. This is just something which just happens. There's a random chance of it happening, because as you're throwing it through the air, it's not going to fly in a straight line, it's going to be a little bit wonky. And normally you can actually offset it or hope it doesn't happen at the start by just giving a little yank at the start. That'll get it all going in the right direction all at once, so it's not just slowly picking up the slack. This is the main reason why I recommended plugs to be the first beginner lure, because let's just give it a little yank just to get it all straightened up. Look at my rod tip. I'm trying to keep it as still as possible, but this lure is just shaking it around all over the place. It feels like you've got a little fish on, And especially for when I started, it really helped my confidence knowing that my lure is actually swimming like an actual fish, and I could probably actually catch a real fish on it. It's hard at the start to figure out why a fish would bite a metal, something that looks metal and looks nothing like a fish, or something plastic that looks nothing like a fish with a hook on it. But you could probably convince yourself that it would go for a plug like this. This is the beginning of what got me hooked. You can see now, especially banging away. I'm trying to keep the rod steady, and he's just going to keep swimming his own little way.
And so, with that, I now conclude the beginner lure video. You should now have a pretty good idea of what lures to throw, when to throw, and not to get too stuck up in all the marketing nonsense. I think it's also pretty important to mention that I think you should give all your lures and even all your gear, even your reel, a rinse down with a bit of fresh water when you come back, especially back from the beach. Just keep everything going a little bit longer. Either way, I hope you continue to watch this channel. Regardless of how many views or anything else it gets, I plan to keep making more and more videos regarding different bits of fishing. Even just to refer a friend and have somebody look at and maybe pick up something very quickly. I thank you very much for watching my last video, and I thank you also for watching this video. To the many and the few, I thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks very much for watching. God bless, and maybe like and subscribe. God bless. Bye-bye.